Welcome to this tutorial video looking at critical paths. In this video we'll be examining forward scanning, backward scanning, we'll be identifying a critical path from a network, we'll be calculating floats, and finally investigating the concept of crashing. So I've got a simple network here with activities A, B, C, D, E, F and G, all of which have the number of days required to complete each of those activities. So I would like to complete a forward scan. We start left hand side with 0 as our starting point. Activity A takes 7, so the earliest times we can start B or C is 7. 7 plus 4 gives us 11 before we can start E. 11 plus 12 gives me 23, and 23 plus 8 will give me a total of 31. You can see that this final vertex has one or two activities entering into it. So 31 is if we examine the path A, C, E and G. Up the top, 7 plus 11 would give us 18, 18 plus 3, 21, 21 plus 6 gives me a total time if I follow that particular path of 27. So I've got two options. If I follow activity F into this vertex, it's 27. Activity G requires 31 days. Now when we're doing a forward scan and we've got two competing or alternative edges going towards a vertex, whether it be the final or earlier on in the network, we always take the larger of the two numbers. So I enter in of 27 and 31, I enter in 31 in the left hand side of my box. So that's my forward scan. Looking now at my backward scan, I start with the same point at the end here, 31, same number we ended up with our forward scan, and from 31 we work backwards and subtract 6 gives me 25, subtract 3 gives me 22, subtract 11, so option B, 22 take 11, would give me a time of 11. Alternatively down the bottom, 31, subtract 8 gives me 23, subtract 12 gives me 11, subtract 4 would give me 7. Now unlike a forward scan, when you have two competing edges with a backward scan, you take the lower of the two numbers. So activity B working backwards would give me a time of 11, whereas activity C working backwards gives me a time of 7. So 7 is chosen. 7 takes 7 of course gives me 0. So there's my completed forward and backward scan. Now that we have this information, we can try and identify the critical path. As you can see, the critical path is A, C, E and G. And the giveaway here is that the earliest starting time and the latest starting time is the same for A, for C, for E, for G, and of course completion, 31 and 31. There is no option. They have to start at 0 and start and finish at 7. C has to start at 7 and finish at 11. E has to start at 11 and finish at 23. And G has to start at 23 and finish at 31 if this project is to be completed at the earliest completion time. There is no option to have a float or a slack time in activities A, C, E and G to get this task completed in 31 days. Let's have a look at the float time for the non-critical activities. So up the top we can see that B, D and F weren't on the critical path. So let's have a look. Activity B can start as early as 7 and finish as late as 22. So 7 from 22 tells me there's 15 days available for activity B to be completed. However, we only require 11, so 15 minus 11 tells me there's 4 days of float available. Again, we can start at 7 at the earliest, finish at 22 at the latest. That gives me 15 days to get the job done. I only require 11, so I have a float of 4. When I look at activity D, you can start as early as 18 and finish as late as 25, which gives me 7 days available. It requires 3, as can be seen here. Activity D requires 3 days. So it has a float of 7 available, minus 3 for the activity, a float of 4. And finally, activity F. It has an early start time of 21 and the latest completion time or latest finishing time of 31. So 21 from 31 gives me 10 days available to complete activity F. Activity F only requires 6, so there are 4 days of float available in activity F. Okay, let's consider crashing. Crashing is whereby we can reduce the duration of an activity in order to restrict or reduce the entire earliest completion time. So in this scenario, we did have originally E, an activity E taking 12 days. We've crashed that down to an activity E of only taking 7 days. Some example is through the use of a new supplier, activity E can now be completed in only 7 days. So let's see what impact this has or effect upon the previous activities we did a minute ago. So first of all, forward scanning. So 0 plus 7 gives me 7, plus 4 gives me 11, plus 7 gives me 18 rather, plus 8 would give me 26. Taking the other path, I've got 0 plus 7 gives me 7, plus activity B of 11 gives me 18, activity D of 3 gives me 21, activity F of 6 gives me a total of 27. On forward scanning, activity F gives me a total of 27, activity G gives me a total of 26. I take the higher of the two numbers, 27. If I entered in 26, activity F wouldn't be completed, so this is not the earliest completion time. In effect, you're taking the longer of the two times to calculate the actual earliest completion time. So 27 is entered in. That's our forward scan. Now looking at our backward scan, we start with 27 and we do the reverse. 27 minus 6 gives us 21, minus 3 gives us 18, minus 11 would give us 7 as one option going into the end of activity B. Working on the bottom branch, we've got 27, minus 8 gives me 19, minus 7 gives me 12, minus 4 gives me 7. Doing a reverse scan, we take the lower of the two options. Activity B going backwards would provide a time of 7, activity C going backwards would give me a time of 8. So we take 7 with a backward scan. 7 take 7 gives me 0. So there's a completed forward and backward scan for our new network. Finally, let's identify the critical path. Clearly we can see that activity A starts at 0 and 0. It's the earliest and the latest starting time. Activity B starts at 7 or 7. Activity D, 18 or 18. Activity F is 21, 21. They both finish on 27, 27. So A, B, D and E is now the new critical path. It's changed because of our crashing of activity E. Finally, the float time for the non-critical activities. So activities C, E and F have variations in when they can start and finish. They're not on the critical path. So activity C can start as early as 7, finish as late as 12, which means there's 5 days available to complete an activity of 4 days duration. Gives me a float of 1. Activity E can start as early as 11 and finish as late as 19, which gives me an available time of 8 days to complete this particular task. The activity itself only requires 7, so 8 minus 7 gives me a float of 1 day. A float means the time we have up our sleeve, if you like, sometimes called the slack of the project. Activity G starts at 18, finishes at 27, gives me available time of 9 days. The activity itself only requires 8, so it has 9 minus 8, a float of 1. I hope this has given you some insight into forward scanning, backward scanning, analysis of critical paths, looking at calculating the float time, and also analysing crashing via a simple example. Once again, thanks for viewing.